Hello, my name is Sanjay Thuppul. My topic today is prevalence of concussions in collision versus contact sports, and my mentor was Anish. The introduction. The three main topics in this position paper is what is a concussion, the types of sports in terms of its classification, and high energy impacts. A concussion is a type of traumatic brain injury, or TBI, caused by a bump, blow, or jolt to the head, or by a hit to the body that causes the head and brain to move rapidly back and forth. The two types of sports, collision and contact sports, have been classified based off their definitions. In collision sports, the person or player purposely hits or collides with other people with objects with great force. In a contact sport, contact is merely a part of the game and not the main purpose. High energy impact or high energy injury is when the head hits or is hit with extreme force or pressure and can be detected using G-force, which we will talk about later. High energy impact on the frontal lobe, temporal lobes, and hippocampus are what causes concussions most of the time. Impact on the brain. G-force. G-force is a type of measurement to determine what the impact on the brain or body was, and is going to be one of the main deciding factors in the difference between concussions and the two classifications of sports. The frontal lobe is considered the most dangerous place to receive a blow and is the majority of causes in terms of concussions. The brain has three major parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. The frontal lobe is in the cerebrum, which controls physical coordination, balance, and other necessary things. This is why when someone gets hit on their frontal lobe, it's considered to be very dangerous, as the player can lose balance, experience loss of memory, speech, and many others. Long-term trauma, such as CTE, can be caused due to these high energy impacts being constantly exerted onto the frontal lobe. Here's an image of the normal brain versus when someone develops advanced CTE. Just notice the size and discoloration of the advanced CTE brain model. And last, major impacts on the brain can cause second impact syndrome. Second impact syndrome, SIS, is when someone gets a second concussion and can have lasting health effects from that second injury. The impact of SIS also differs between the two types of sports, collision and contact, as due to the G-force, second impact syndrome is much more common in collision sports and can in fact be much worse. A bad example of second impact syndrome is fencing. Fencing is a neurological response to major head trauma in which fingers will go straight or fists will ball up in terms of body. This led us to thinking, why exactly do collision sports have such a higher occurrence rate of concussions? And what exactly is it that causes this increased rate? Our study and analysis. Using published statistics from professional leagues, we could determine different rates of concussions and long-term brain trauma in sports and identify why they had such different rates. We used statistics from the English Premier League and NFL. All were official data sets. We also used other published research about the extreme rates of brain trauma in sports. Some examples of the evidence that we used was the fact that the frontal lobe can not only be the worst place to be hit, but also in football can see averages of G-force up to 100 Gs per hit. In comparison to soccer, a contact sport, where the G-force per hit is only around 42. You can also take into the fact that per 100,000 athlete exposures, rugby experiences 418 concussions in compared to 42 concussions per 100,000 people in soccer. The main reason for this is what we used to determine our results and conclusion. Our results from this study were that the high impact to the head seen in collision sports increases the rate of concussions compared to contact sports. Collision sports have a higher rate of concussion and long-term trauma due to the rate of high energy impacts exerted on the frontal lobe, temporal lobes, and hippocampus. One example here is this graph that we have put together using these different data sets and different statistics on these sports. As you can see, the blue represents the average G-force per hit. Now take a look at basketball, baseball, and soccer, our three contact sports, and notice the extremely smaller amount of G-force per hit in these three sports, all averaging around 40 to 50 G-force per hit, and mainly to the head. Now take into account hockey, football, lacrosse, and rugby. Although rugby can differ due to the high amount of hits, the other three collision sports have exponentially increased in terms of G-force compared to the contact sports. Hockey has a G-force at around 105 per hit, football 103 per hit, and lacrosse 68 Gs per hit. All three of these are increased by nearly double the contact sports. Now, let's look at average concussions per 100,000 athlete exposures. Basketball, below 50, baseball, nearing the 20s, and soccer, our third contact sport, nearing the 40 mark per 100,000 athlete exposures. Now you look at collision sports such as hockey, football, lacrosse, and rugby, and you can notice the major difference. Lacrosse, the smallest amount of average concussions per athlete exposures, is already more than basketball, which is the most in terms of contact sports. Lacrosse has an average of about 70 per 100,000 athlete exposures, and then increases to about 75 to 80 in football, about 120 in hockey, and the major one in rugby, 418 concussions per 100,000 athlete exposures. Now, earlier we mentioned second impact syndrome. How does these statistics affect that? Well, if you can see, average recovery time, marked in yellow, for the three contact sports are a lot less in terms of days. Basketball, baseball, soccer, all taking 3 to 7 days to fully recover from a regular concussion in those sports. In hockey, football, lacrosse, and rugby, you can see the difference in increased time. And since increased time, if they don't get that full recovery, second impact syndrome is much more of a threat to those players. We can also infer that the G-force per hit, average concussions, and the average recovery time to fully heal are directly proportional to each other, as whenever one of them goes up, the other will too, which is why we can answer the question, collision sports have a much higher rate of concussions due to the average G-force per hit on the frontal lobe, temporal lobe, and hippocampus. With current results that we have, it's vital that we improve on this and make improvements in equipment, technology, and in detection and treatment so that we can prevent such problems in the future. New technology has been introduced already, and these are the type of things we need to promote and support to introduce into these professional sports. One new technology being researched is University of Alabama's new handheld infrared scanner. The $2.8 million device can pick up on early signs of CTE, which usually can only be detected once an autopsy has been done on their body. These new technologies can determine if one could be on a path of CTE and try to get them any help that they can to avoid such a future. Another major product that has been introduced is the Oculegia new eye tracking product, which can identify signs of CTE through playing, whether it's someone getting hit in the head multiple times that can then detect a concussion and maybe again another concussion. These all can play into the fact that CTE can be discovered, which really hasn't been thought about yet. Aside from new technologies, we also need to work on detection and treatment in terms of rules and we have in sports. The NFL has recently enforced new concussion protocols to prevent second impact syndrome, as one must take 7 days minimum off before they return to sports. These are all ways that we can improve on these concussion rates in collision sports and can improve overall on the amount of concussions we see in any sports. Thank you for your time. Please let me know if there are any questions.